are facing currently. And my priority has to be on making sure that we absolutely focus on the things that are most important, that we have oversight of those things, but that we also allow our executive operational pressures that we are absolutely facing. So this is going to have a slightly different format, and I'll say a little bit more about that as we go through. However, board members will be aware that it is my custom to start each board meeting by referencing our strategic pyramid. That's that graphic, that very helpful graphic that brings together in one place not only our strategy and our direction, but also our values and our behaviours. I'm not going to dwell on it too much this morning for obvious reasons, but I do want to just take a moment to just draw our attention to the top of that pyramid, where we have the very easy mantra, one might say, of putting patients first. I know, and as I say, things are really, really hard at the moment. And as I walk around our sites and speak to our colleagues, I know how difficult things are for so many of them. They're professionals, and I know by talking to them that they try every day to put patients first, but for reasons that are beyond their control, they tell me that they find themselves on most days at the moment in a situation where they fear that they are not able to give the care to their patients that they would otherwise wish to do. And it goes more than that. They fear, some of them tell me, that they are failing their patients, or they are failing their colleagues. For those colleagues, for any of them who may be listening to this, I'd like to say this to you. No, you're not. As I walk around the Trust and I speak to colleagues of all roles, of all grades, I am humbled by the many examples I see of our colleagues doing whatever they can to give the best possible care to our patients in what are sometimes incredibly difficult circumstances. Some of these things are big things, some of these things are small things, but they are all doing their absolute best to deliver the best care to their patients. So you are not failing, you are doing the best you can. And I would like to thank you for everything that you are doing on behalf of this board, on behalf of our patients, and behalf of the people of Worcestershire. The other thing that we always start our boards with is a patient story. It keeps us grounded. It reminds us of how we try every day to put patients first, and how sometimes by seeing a patient as an individual, you can actually tailor support around that patient to have a massive impact on their lives. And with that in mind, I'd like to hand over to Jackie Edwards, our chief nurse, to introduce our patient story. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's a real pleasure actually to present the patient story, and I think it does really set the scene of, and on the back of what you were saying, of how we've got staff who are going above and beyond actually to meet the holistic needs of patients. And I think this is what this story really does enhance for us in our understanding of that sort of lived experience. I'm not going to say any more, but hand over to Anna actually to take us through some of the outline, and then to actually hear directly from our patients themselves.
Thank you, Jackie. I won't speak for too long. We've got a short 5-minute video. I was privileged to meet with Lisa, who may be watching live now or are recording back. Lisa has Marfan syndrome, and like many other patients, felt abandoned and let down. until she started using our service and working crucially in partnership with our staff team. Our pain service makes a real difference to our patients' lives every day, crucially by empowering our patients to take control of their own lives. So I won't say too much, but as you listen to the film and then hear from Dr. Sarah Sherwood, who's here today, and also Dr. Chowdhury, you'll hear about actually how this can support our patients not only now, but it's incredibly preventative, and definitely sings to not only putting our patients first, but absolutely every level through our strategic pyramid and our challenges, not only in the trust, but across the system. I now need to multitask, excuse me a minute. Just bear with me.
Anna, I can't hear the audio on this.
Excuse me, I'll just start again.
Been diagnosed with Marfan syndrome since I was about 19. It affects all my connective tissue.
Anna, sorry, so I can now hear the audio but not see the pictures. I don't know if that's true of everyone, but yeah. But we did get the audio that time, that's a positive.
My apologies, I'm not entirely certain why. If you just bear with me a moment.
Oh dear, this is going to be one of these days. We're going to have technical problems. Never mind, it'll be fine.
Okay, can you see the screen?
We can.
Right, let's go for this one. Ready?
Been diagnosed with Marfan syndrome since I was about 19. It affects all my connective tissue in my body, so it causes a lot of pain, a lot of fatigue. It's also took my vision, so I'm actually severely sight impaired. So the GP was just putting me on medication. I was on Cocodamol, I was on naproxen, and I kept going about my pain, and I felt really dismissed. I felt like I weren't being listened to, and it's just like almost like I was making it up, and I was just to get on with it. And comments like, "Oh, well, you've got Marfan's, you're going to be in pain," you know. So, you know, I went to my GP, and because I was having a problem with my back. And I was absolutely concerned that there was something really serious going on with my back, and it was on my mind constantly. And I was like, they're missing something, something's not right here, you know. And then they suggested the pain. I went for hydrotherapy at Worcester, and that was amazing. And then the lady there referred me to the pain management team. I think it gave me a lot of confidence. It gave me, I think I lost so much confidence in myself and my own abilities, and it just gave me a bit of me time. And you know, I thought I really enjoyed this. I liked the water anyway, and I liked swimming, but I had lost a lot of confidence, and it like kind of instilled in me and made me feel happy. And you know, I met nice people on the course, and the lady was amazing. I think because it was structured, and I felt like I felt like Chloe was going through it step by step with me, and I wasn't on my own, and she was really supporting me, and she became that little like voice, that little supporting voice, spurring me on, like, you can do this and you're not by yourself. And I suppose it was just somebody nice to talk to, that I felt listened to me and believed that I was in pain, and, you know, wanted to support me. Amazing. I'm happier. I feel just happier. I've got my smile back. I feel like it's rewired my brain. It's got me back to who I was. I'd lost who I was. Pain became me, and it just overtook everything. I didn't want to socialise. I didn't want to go out. I'd lost all interest in so many things. But I feel like it slowly gave me more confidence, and it gave me time to just take stock of the situation I'm at now and try and improve things, and it really worked. I feel so much better. I really feel like it's just rewired so much, and I look forward to things now, and the pain is there, but it's manageable, and I feel I've reduced my medication. I've reduced my pain medication, and that is amazing. I do meditation daily now, so I was a bit skeptical. I was like, oh no, but that's really, really helped me. I feel so much calmer. So I think there's lots of strategies. Chloe's put lots of strategies in place. Before I was ready to leave, we made sure all this was down, and I felt really supported, that I feel like I can do it on my own. And just really keep chipping at it, and not let that. I used to laugh with Chloe because I used to say that negative Nelly. So I was a negative Nelly, but now I'm a positive Polly. So me and Chloe used to laugh at that. So I always keep that in my mind, just to be positive and look for the positive in the pain, because sometimes, and the pain's okay. It doesn't have to define me. It doesn't have to be, and I've got coping strategies that I know I won't overdo things, and it's to listen to my body. So I feel like me and my pains become friends, whereas before we were enemies. I was fighting against it, and I feel like it feels a bit strange, but I feel like it's there, but I can control it, so it doesn't control me.
Thank you.
Sarah, I'll hand over to you.
Okay, thank you ever so much, Anna, for this opportunity, and hello to everyone, and big thank you to Lisa, really, because a lot of this is about Lisa putting in the hard work as well to engage with our services, and to Chloe Leithleen, who was an assistant psychologist, or is an assistant psychologist in our team. She's actually on annual leave today, well-deserved annual leave, and she worked really hard with myself supervising to undertake the pain plan with Lisa, and our hydrotherapy staff. Nikki Hallam was the physio that worked with her, because I think we're so lucky in Worcestershire to have the hydrotherapy pool. I've worked in a few hospitals, and this is the only hospital with a hydrotherapy pool, and it is a fantastic resource for patients, and the physio staff work so hard with these patients, and it really helps, just gives some relief and confidence. And just to say a little bit about the background to what we were doing. Is this okay? I'm talking at you. Please stop if you need to ask me questions. We were commissioned to deliver a pain management programme in Worcestershire, literally probably the day before national lockdown. So we were absolutely delighted, because the pain team, prior to me joining, had been trying for 20 years to get a pain management programme in Worcestershire. We were the only county without a pain management programme in England, for various reasons we're commissioning. We were delighted to get it, but at the same time, the other extreme emotion was this was the day before lockdown, so we couldn't possibly roll out a group programme all, obviously very uncertain ourselves. And most of our staff went to the front line. Dr. Chowdhury, our lead consultant, will be talking in a moment. But for a few of us who were still trying to run the chronic pain service during the difficult time of the pandemic, we had to adapt our services. And while we couldn't start running a face-to-face group for pain management, what we could do is offer the pain plan, which is designed by Professor Bob Lewin, and is what Lisa did. Professor Lewin also wrote the angina plan, obviously, but for a different cohort of patients, and we could deliver it remotely, so it was perfect for the pandemic. So it offered support to patients who weren't able to access any support, and we could keep people safe and offer this remotely, and it's something we will keep running. Unfortunately, we did have some injections decommissioned as a result of getting our pain management programme. That was an NHS England directive that stopped facet joint and epidurals. But there are many pain procedures, which Dr. Chowdhury will talk about, because this is his area. I'm the psychologist in the team, so I'll hand over to him in a minute, and he can talk about the pain procedures and the cancer pain service we offer. I think what Lisa shows as well is, and she did such a fantastic job of engaging and taking on board these strategies, but also she could reduce her medications, which obviously has a direct benefit to our health resources. And what we're looking at really in our acute trust, because our work is chronic pain, but if we want to support the chronic pain patients, so then that helps our acute staff, because if we can help our patients not to have flare-ups, so it results in having to come in and access acute services, if we can help support them to manage well at home, hopefully then we can all help within a wider team, within, before things escalate. We certainly don't want to be people experiencing, severe flare-ups and things. Just say we started our pain management programme now, which is wonderful. So we're actually meeting people face to face. We've started that at Whittington Community Hall, close to Junction 7 of the M5, not far from the hospital. And patients are just, really grateful to have this support. And we're working in a team with a psychology, physio and nursing, as we can all have that multidisciplinary care. And it's just great that we can get patients together now in face to face, and you can see how that really helps them connect and not feel so alone, I think, which is the problem, because this is such a common problem. I think a third to a half of the UK population have chronic pain, so it's important that we help. Pain is miserable, really, so nobody, anybody would be sad being in pain. That's normal psychology, isn't it? We need to help these patients. So I'll let Dr. Chowdhury say anything about his side of things with the medical input now. I have seen him on there. I can see
Dr. Chowdhury.
Hello. Sorry, my mic was on mute. I hope everyone can hear me now. I'm Dr. Chowdhury, and I've been working in pain team at Worcester Acute Hospitals since 2009. Often, actually, we face with patients who are gone through different specialties, and quite many of those don't have a sort of cure for their problems, and we get referred these patients for pain management. And by the time they come, often they have seen multiple specialty doctors or professionals, and then they are often quite annoyed and frustrated with delays and not being able to manage their pain. So these patients do need a sort of multidimensional approach to manage their pain, and one of the most important, or even I would say NICE approved treatment, is pain management program. And when I joined Trust in 2009, it happened to be on the first day there was a meeting with CCG team about getting funding for pain management program, and we kept having these meetings almost year on without really CCG agreeing to commission pain management program until Dr. Sherwood joined the team, I think about 5-6 years ago, and Dr. Sherwood and the team has worked really hard to convince them why really we need pain management program and how effective it is for patients' journey and their pain management. And I cannot stress really how hard Dr. Sherwood has worked with patiently and communicating with CCG team and stressing importance why it is so important to have pain management program. And thankfully they have agreed to commission it now. And even after this, as Dr. Sherwood mentioned, there have been logistical issues about various aspects to get this program running, but we are really pleased, and I'm particularly pleased for Dr. Sherwood and her team to get this program up and running now. And this patient's journey really narrates the story which many patients are suffering. We still have challenges as all other specialties in the hospital have, but I think we are plodding along with some help from Trust Board and our departmental colleagues, and hopefully we'll move forward. But yeah, I think one of the aim at some stage I felt that before I retire it would be nice to have a pain management program running, and I'm really pleased that it is now up and running. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chowdhury. Anna, do you have any closing remarks, or shall I open it up for questions?
No, I think people probably have questions, so open it up for questions.
Brilliant, thank you, and thank you to Sarah and Marshwa and Anna, of course, and of course to Lisa, our patient, for doing that video. Simon.
Thanks, Anita, and echo my thanks also. My question's about, are we reaching everybody? And what strategies have we in place to ensure that everybody who needs the service is able to access it? Because the figures you gave, Sarah, in terms of a third to a half, suggests that there may be an awful lot of unmet need out there. So it's a question on how we're going to reach out to those people who need the service and how we're going to meet those needs.
Yeah, the commissioners have designed a whole Worcestershire pathway for pain that not only it goes beyond the acute services and out to the community. It starts with the GP, and I think probably the next phase is about putting a teaching program together to get all those different groups together, the advanced physios, the GPs, and us all to be talking, because I think it starts right in the GP practice, doesn't it? A lot of this work is done by our advanced physios as well. Not everybody obviously comes to our services where, you know, secondary care. And I think, yeah, you're right, we need to start at probably in primary care, really, about, you know, those consultations with the GPs and making, I think obviously GPs do an excellent job, but making sure that all needs are, you know, as holistic as possible right from the beginning, and empowering our physios as well, that they feel they've got the tools to manage this. So yeah, it is a lot of patients need to meet, and I think we all need to start talking together to make sure we're all working and sharing the same messages. So my GP colleagues as well.
Any other questions, just while others are thinking? I wonder if I could ask a question. I mean, you mentioned that at the beginning the CCG had been quite reluctant to fund the service, and it sounds like you had to fight for quite a while to get that done, and it sounds to me appalling that we were the only area in the country that didn't have that. That sounds like definitely pretty bad. Given the success of the programme since you started it, are the CTG, or I should say the ICS, are they now committed to this? Is this something that they absolutely see the benefit of? And if they're not, what are you doing in terms of promoting that and sharing your case studies and things to try and make sure that they understand that this is something that mustn't go away?
Yeah, we've got to produce outcomes in the business case every 3 months. So we collect outcomes before patients start and after, looking at their mood, their medication usage, their confidence, their acceptance of the pain, because that's part of it, because unfortunately we can't get rid of the pain. It is about learning to live with it, and we have to produce reports on those. So some of it is quite objective data, and then we have the patient satisfaction feedback as well, so the more quality outcomes, looking at the patient's lived experience. So yeah, we've got to keep that communication going.
Okay, great, thank you. I don't see any other hands, so I'll bring this to a close. So first of all, thank you so much to all of you for coming today and sharing this with us. It's great to see a success story, and one that, from the sounds of it, you had to fight really hard to get initially. So well done you for achieving that initially, but also that you're having that sort of impact to patients' lives is really lovely to hear. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you'd like to disconnect now, yeah, that's absolutely fine. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye. Great, lovely start to the board. Okay, let's get going then through our formal business. In terms of apologies for absence, I received an apology from Richard Oostrom, but I haven't been notified of any others. Rebecca's shaking her head, so I'll take it as that. And in terms of items of any other business, I've not been notified of any in advance. Again, a shake for Rebecca, so I'll assume that's right. Declarations of interest. We obviously have our standard declarations are on our website, but again, are there any declarations specific to today's agenda that anyone would like to declare? No, I see nothing on there. Brilliant. Okay, let's now move on to the minutes of the last meeting. I wonder if I could get your confirmation of that this is a true record of that meeting, or if there are any changes or clarifications needed, please let me know. It goes on several pages. I don't see any hands being raised. Can I take this as a true record? We happy? Thank you. Great, those have been approved. Moving on then to the action log. Rebecca.
Yes, Chair, there's no action that's due for update at this meeting. It's scheduled in February and covered through the People and Culture Committee. Thank you. Okay, Simon, you wanted to come in.
Sorry, there was just an item on the minutes, if I may, and then also on the acting schedule. The item on the minutes was on page 10, the theatre utilisation accountability framework. Was that ever signed off? The indication was that it was going to be signed off. And the second question was just a practical one on the implementation of the behavioural charter. I was at the BAME staff network earlier this week. I think everybody's still waiting for the outputs. I know there's an awful lot of work going on with this, but it is very much in the realms of, will it make a difference to every member of staff, and how are we going to ensure that? So just two questions from me, please.
Right, I think Tina wants to come in on that behavioural charter point. Tina?
Yes, there is four elements to the behaviour charter. We provide regular updates to the People and Culture Committee on those, but we're taking them one phase at a time. So we started with the violence and aggression element to it. So we have got a regular steering group in place, Simon, that meets to work this through. It's our challenge, because of other things going on in the trust at the moment in regards to the pace of this, is the honest answer. But we have got the governance in place to make sure that this is embedded appropriately across the organisation. So I'm happy to brief you outside of the board if that would be helpful.
That would be appreciated, thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Paul, you wanted to come in.
Thanks, Chair. Just in terms of the first point Simon raised, the accountability framework went to the theatre group this Wednesday. There were a couple of changes made, and with those changes, then we look to sign it off at the next group meeting, and then on governance terms take it through to TME.
Thank you, Paul.
It is now agreed, it's just now going through process.
Brilliant, thank you, Paul. Christine.
Yeah, it's a matter arising really from page 8 of the minutes relating to the discussion we had about whether we were doing everything we could to get patients home in a timely manner. We've run a couple of exercises this week where we've brought some peer challenge into the discharge process with a team of experienced clinicians internally, and then again with the Chief Medical Officer of the ICB. We've been going round and challenging the timeliness of our discharges, and that's been a very positive exercise. There was also a question of whether we are keeping patients in hospital for diagnostic test results, and as of yesterday we had 28 patients who were being followed up in their own home waiting for diagnostic tests to be done or the results to be made available.
Okay, thank you, Christine, and that's a really helpful addition, because actually one of the questions I had was that we at various times during our minutes have a discussion and we don't necessarily see visibility that the loop was closed or that a conversation happened, or in the case of the accountability framework. And also, obviously, for example, things like the patient story, where as board members will remember that we had a couple of members of the deaf community with us last time. There were various things that they were asking for, and again, it would be really helpful for us to have a mechanism to make sure that we captured those things and we did close the loop and we dotted all the I's and crossed the T's on these things that arise in board. I think we've asked in the past whether that can be reflected in the action log or some other way, but can I just please reiterate that request, because I think it will give us all assurance that when things are raised to us, that they don't just sort of slip into the void and get forgotten about. We need to make sure that those things get closed. So if I could please make that request again. But recognising that at the moment things are a little bit, a little trickier. So for next time and onwards, I think that would be a useful thing for us to do. Right, moving on, I'm going to take the chair's report as read, if that's all right. I think you can see that I had a couple of chair's actions. So I'm just going to move straight on, and I'm going to hand over to Matthew for the Chief Executive's report.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. And obviously, you have a relatively short report, which reflects, I think, the Christmas and New Year time. But I think what it doesn't reflect is the really torrid time that health services in Worcestershire have been under, particularly for us. Our services in our hospitals really have. I think in my nearly 38 years in the NHS, it really is unprecedented. I know we said that during COVID, during the pandemic, but this is a significantly different order of challenge that we've been facing. And I want to just make sure the board understands some of the consequences of some of the things that have been happening. Of course, colleagues will be aware from national media and other routes that we've really had the perfect storm of increased COVID levels, a significant challenge of flu and other viruses. We've had strike action, which I'll come back to in a moment, not just nursing and ambulance workers, but we've had train strikes, Royal Mail strikes. All of those things have been impacting on our patients and our staff, and I'll come back to those points in a moment. We would ordinarily expect a Christmas and New Year period to be busy, but the reality for us is that it really has been a horrible time for patients and for our staff, and I cannot underplay that. Each of our ED departments, but particularly the Worcestershire Royal site, has had extra patients. The walls of the emergency department have been pushed to their extreme in relation to patients being cared for in corridors, and we've discussed that here earlier, during last year, about concerns around safety. And on the 20th of December, decision was made at regional NHS level to instruct the ambulance service to bring 18 patients into the emergency department, into an already overcrowded department. I was in that department at the time, and I don't think I've seen anything quite like I saw. We know our emergency department at the Worcestershire Royal site is too small. Maximum capacity that it was designed for was around 50. Of course, 50 patients. We at that point on the 20th had 176 patients in our emergency department in the Worcestershire Royal site, with then 18 extra ambulance cases brought into corridors. I've never seen anything quite like it, and I want to put on record my apology to the staff for not having been able to stop that happening. As accountable officer for Worcestershire Acute Hospitals, I wasn't able to stop it because I wasn't aware it was going to happen, and I only found out when the clinical divisional director for the urgent care division informed me that it had happened. So we called a critical incident at that point. We had no other option to bring the system colleagues alongside us to try to expedite, lower the threshold in relation to discharging patients from our hospitals. And this was, of course, at a time of the second nurses' strike, which was on the same day, which, of course, our teams had been preparing and planning for in order to keep patients safe. Now, we had no reported clinical incidents, but that was, I think, more by luck than judgment, given the circumstances that our services had been in. So I think it's been a very challenging and very difficult period. The 20th of December, I think, culminated in those pressures really coming to really a climax, and hence, like many hospitals, I think across the country, we moved into internal critical incident and then system internal critical incident in order to respond. And over the course of the subsequent days, there was some decompression and improvement, partly because of the ambulance strike impact, with slightly lower volumes of activity on the following day. I think it's also worth noting at the same time we have had pretty much all of the wards that could accommodate extra patients on their wards, accommodating patients on those extra wards those extra patients on the wards at the Worcestershire Royal site. So we have a number of wards that have had one or two, and some cases 3 more patients being cared for in the corridors of those wards, which again is poor patient experience and poor staff experience as well. I think it's fair to say that the team, leadership team relationship with our RCN colleagues has helped to mitigate the impact of the 2 nurses' strikes on the 15th and the 20th of December. Chair, you and I visited the picket line, and I think our relationship with the RCN, I think, worked well in order to maintain patient safety. And we've had the subsequent ambulance strike day yesterday, and again we I think managed to maintain patient safety, albeit during yesterday afternoon we had again a very congested emergency department to help to support the decompression. All of these things, all of these strikes, I think it's important that we recognise are not just impacting on the staff in the department, they're actually impacting on everybody. The amount of planning, preparation, additional meetings, assurance reports that have to be provided up to government has a significant impact on pretty much the whole of the executive leadership, the whole of the senior management team, and on the frontline staff. And that's on top of what would normally be a busy period, and I think I just want to pay tribute again to my executive team, the senior leadership team across the clinical divisions, corporate teams as well that have stepped in and supported. This isn't sustainable. This is not a sustainable way of running acute hospitals and the NHS, and something has to change. I think we've got to continue to do our bit in supporting our patients and our staff as best we can, but we are seeing a significant adverse impact on staff morale, on turnover, and also just the well-being, health and well-being of our staff. I'm particularly concerned about some of our urgent care leaders who are very much feeling the strain at the moment. I don't think I've overstated that, Chair. I think it is a very serious period that we're having to deal with, and of course the consequence of all of this is that some of the other activity that we would want to be spending proper time on in terms of planning for the next financial year, making sure we're dealing with, as Tina referenced earlier, dealing with important things around culture and behavioural charter and those things that we know are important to our staff and our patients. It really are not getting a look in at the moment because of the significant impact. We know we've got a physio strike coming up and further RCN strikes and junior doctors potentially in March. This is not going to be an easy period for anybody concerned. I just want to make sure that we understand that, but we are prioritising patient safety as our mantra. As you said in your introduction, Chair, putting patients first has got to be our priority. I'll pause there. If there's any particular comments or points to note, I've got another note just in my report just to draw attention to, but I'll pause there because I can see a couple of hands gone up.
Yes, thank you, Matthew, and completely reiterate your comments. I mean, it is the pressure on all our colleagues at both executive level and all the way down is just appalling, frankly, and completely unsustainable. So absolutely echo your thanks, and we absolutely put on record just how hard everyone is working to try and deal with the situation that we're in. I'll go to Julie, thanks.
Thank you, Matthew. I don't think you understated that at all. In fact, I think you were quite muted in that. I am upset and angry in equal measure about this, because I think I would like to put on record apology to patients for the standard of care we're offering. I'd like to put, how can you keep saying thanks to the staff for what they're doing? That includes everybody in the trust, but actually we can only thank them that they are doing a magnificent job in circumstances that are well beyond their control and our control. I hope somewhere in these voluminous risk assessments you're having to do that we are stating now that actually we do not accept that this is a safe situation that has been forced upon us by others' decisions. It might be the least bad option, but actually this is not acceptable and it is not safe, and in this day and age this should not be happening. And I am, as I've said, upset and angry in equal measure about all of this, because it is not acceptable by any stretch of the imagination for this to be happening. I didn't know, I mean I would have guessed, I didn't know about the voluminous risk reports having to go up, but the other thing I wanted to ask, and it's I go on like it all the time, what about the system response? Can we not say the commissioners, where are they in this? They should have commissioned enough capacity to cope with people back down the line so we wouldn't be as bad as we are now. What are people doing about sharing the burden across? I have no issue with the ambulance or anybody else. They're doing what they have to do, and people are taking the least bad option, but actually we have to make it very clear via those assessments this isn't on, and the rest of the system has to play its part as well. Sorry, that was a rant, Anita.
No, not at all. As I say, I don't think I disagree with a single thing you've said. I'll leave Matthew to respond in a moment, but let's go to Simon next. Thanks.
Thanks, Anita, and thanks, Matthew. The comments I heard after the 20th of December, I think the one that sticks in my mind most from a colleague was, I'll never forget and never forgive what was done on that day to us. I'm pleased you've mentioned in your opening remarks there who took the decision for the 18 ambulances to offload. It wasn't actually in your written text, and I think it's important that we record that in the minutes, and the fact that you were not informed, and this was just done not just to us but to others as well. And I think it's important that we point out the guilty party in this, because what was done was not acceptable. My question to you though, is there any more that we ourselves, I mean, I totally agree with what Julie's saying about the system, but is there any more that we can do ourselves to ensure that we are supporting our A&E colleagues, our urgent emergency colleagues from within? I know it's a difficult time for everybody, but I do also pick up echoes of, communication, support from other parts of the hospital when called upon to ensure that we are able to move people swiftly out of A&E. So I would ask that we have another look at what we're doing internally ourselves to make sure that everything we are doing to support those colleagues has been put in place.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. I see Sue's raised her hand, so Matthew, if you could just hold fire, and I don't know if any other exec colleagues want to come in. Let's hear from Sue, and then we'll look at it all in the round. Sue.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to repeat the more eloquent statements that preceded me, other than just heavily endorse them. But in addition, Matthew, unless I've missed it, have we got clarity of who actually took that decision to send us 18 ambulances? Do we know who it was, what body or individual? Because I think that should be minuted in this meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Sue. I don't see any other raised hands, so Matthew, shall I come back to you?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So working through those points, which I think are well made, certainly the response from system colleagues to the situation on the 20th, I think, was what we would see as appropriate. I think there was I think a good response to help to support the discharge of patients. I think the key for us is how do we maintain that pace now as we move into the next, if you like, the next phase of industrial action on top of the situation of flu and other viral infections that are causing that increased complexity and acuity. I think we are seeing some response in terms of opening additional capacity in the community. We need to see that being done at pace. We know we've also got some process improvements that we can make, which I'm sure we'll touch on to some extent later in the meeting. Christine's already referenced the peer review exercise with the ICB Chief Medical Officer, which highlighted some areas that I think will be helpful, particularly where patients are coming into acute hospitals inappropriately. What we need to see, Julie, I think, is that system support continuing when we're not in such an extreme situation, albeit in a pressured situation, and also recognise that our primary care colleagues are seeing unprecedented levels of demand as well at a time. So I think it's important to acknowledge the whole of the NHS and social care system is under significant pressure. We do, though, need to make sure that we've got data that we all agree with that makes clear the situation as we see it. Simon, your point about the support to the teams. I mean, it's been good that we have had situations where intensive care consultant colleagues have joined the ED consultants to provide support. We've yesterday had a consultant radiologist working in the department to support ED colleagues to try and make sure that process through diagnostics is done as well as possible, and through the command and control process that we have in place for industrial action. One of the questions we're asking regularly is what else, what additional support. The challenge really is, in reality, when you've got a congested ED department, space is what you need to be able to do your job properly, and therefore the support from the rest of the hospital, the +1ing, +2ing of extra patients on wards, is part of compressing and making sure that we've got flow into our assessment areas, and our surgical assessment areas is also key. But I think you're right, Simon. It's a question that we need to keep asking our teams, because they're at the sharp end of all of this. And then, Sue, your point. The decision was made by the Director of Performance at the NHS Midlands region in order to decompress the ambulance service ahead of the ambulance strike on the 21st. Having worked at regional level, I do know that making these decisions is very difficult, and it was seen to be necessary across a number of acute hospitals across the region, I suspect across the country and other regions as well. And subsequently I wrote to Simon Trickett, our ICB Chief Executive, to set out my concerns about the lack of communication, and asked for him to work with me and the regional colleagues to ensure that any similar sort of situations are properly communicated to the accountable officers, who are the ones that would end up in prison if there is a manslaughter charge as a consequence of those actions bringing patients into an already 176 patients already in the emergency department of the Worcestershire Royal site is and was clearly a very unsafe environment.
Thank you, Matthew. Christine.
Yeah, just to provide some further assurance about the work that we're doing internally to support the emergency department. So we have been rostering additional nursing and medical staff to support the team. We have also on both of our sites put in place a discharge team of a doctor, a pharmacy technician, supported where possible by a nurse, to facilitate faster, simple and timely discharges. We have a daily discharge cell supported by James Avery, our senior nurse, as well as with representatives from the community to facilitate the more rapid, complex discharges. The radiologist in ED that Matthew mentioned not only was doing diagnostic procedures, he was doing therapeutics as well. He unblocked a nephrostomy and drained some fluid from the abdomen and so on. And the successful opening of our larger ambulatory care areas has enabled more patients to be streamed from ED to those areas. So medical SDEC is currently seeing about 70 patients a day. Surgical SDEC is now seeing patients from all surgical specialties, including some minor trauma, ENT and oral and lax facs, which they weren't able to do in the very constrained space they had before.
Great, thank you, Christine. That's a helpful update. Tina.
It was just to respond to Simon's question about support for staff. So from the moral injury element and also to avoid burnout from colleagues, we've put some additional support in from our health psychology team to those areas, but also expanding our restorative clinical supervision support as well. And it was also really important that we maintain keeping the basics in place. So we offered free hot meal, a hot breakfast for their staff on site over the festive period. We continue with free car parking. We lifted the car parking barriers on the strike days as well. There's a number of other things that I'm exploring to make sure we keep getting the basic offer right for colleagues.
Thank you, Tina. Matthew, I'm conscious you didn't quite finish the rest of your report. Was there anything else you wanted to highlight?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to make note of my thanks, and I'm sure thanks to the board, to Sally Minnitt, who's been our guardian of safe working for junior doctors over the course of last 2 years, I think at least, and to welcome Alec Rajkumar to replace Sally in this really important role, particularly supporting junior doctors as we move into potential industrial action from their perspective as well. So, and board members will have, I think, enjoyed Sally's reports to the board in the past, and massive thanks to her, and good luck on her retirement. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Matthew, and absolutely our best wishes to Sally. Thank you. If that concludes the Chief Executive's report, just one thing I'm really conscious of, when I sort of went past the Chair's report and said I'll take it as read, I didn't actually strictly say that there were a couple of Chair's actions in there that I need the ratification of the board for. Hopefully you read the paper, and I hope you're comfortable, but can I have the board's confirmation of ratification of those Chair's actions, please? Thank you very much. Right, moving on then. Annual planning. Joe, obviously we are all conscious of time, but obviously this is an important subject. If we can, as far as possible, deal with this on a sort of a need-to-know basis, escalation, exception, things that are the most important things for us to know, I'd be grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And for sure, this came out on the 23rd of December and amongst everything we have just discussed. So it's here for your information to outline the planning guidance for this year. I just draw your attention to a couple of things, if I may. There are 3 key tasks that have been set out for next year that will come as no surprise. First, to recover our core services and productivity. We need to continue to make progress in delivering the key ambitions of the long-term plan and the transformation of the NHS. And the details of it are enclosed in the paper. They have tried to reduce the number of objectives this year down from 130 to 65, and we've laid out in Appendix 3 a little bit of a compare and contrast about what those are. However, I would lay out that there's still continued, if not increased, ambition in terms of our approach, not just to ambulance waits, but also cancer and our waiting list targets. The risks, therefore, are laid out for you again clearly. Again, we've rehearsed a lot of those in the discussion we just had in terms of the contingent industrial action and exceptional operational pressures, which is really mitigated against us doing the bottom-up approach we'd normally want to adopt. So we are continually reviewing that, and we will pick that discussion up, I think, in private board. There is a system workshop tomorrow, which is starting to bring, seeking to bring some of the discussions forward. Again, the pressures that we've outlined, we're in continual dialogue with colleagues in the ICB, and partly for that reason, also because of the timings, we are seeking approval from the board to both note the paper but support delegation for final sign-off at F&P on the 29th of March. Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Any questions or comments on the planning paper? I don't see any hands. So let me say, so first of all, thank you, Joe and the team, for having put this together. I think it was comprehensive, and I think you set out very clearly what the risks are and how you're having to mitigate those given the operational pressures. So thank you for the work that's been done here. Clearly, we would have ideally wanted a much more bottom-up input into this. But I think we recognise that in the circumstances that we're in, we're not in a perfect world, and therefore we are going to need to use more of a hybrid model. I think my only request will be, we need, however, to make sure that we get ownership at the ground for what we put into the plan. So whilst recognising that we need to probably have a bit of a hybrid model right now, we need to loop back when we are able and make sure that we get that buy-in. Otherwise we stand very little chance of success, as I think we all know. I don't see any other hands. It is therefore for noting, but also specifically, as Joe highlighted, given the time frame that we are in, we will not be meeting again before this plan has to be submitted, and therefore we will need to delegate approval of the plan to Finance and Performance Committee, which is meeting on, what was the date, Joe, that F&P were meeting?
Well, we have got a couple of meetings in between, which we will also go through the detail, but 29th of March will be the final sign.
Will be the one. Okay. So can I have board approval to delegate that agreement to the approval of the plan to F&P committee, please? Okay, thank you very much. Joe, have we given you everything you need for now?
Thank you, Chair, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. And as I say, it's not an ideal place, but it's where we are and it's what we have to deal with. Okay then, so moving on to our next sort of strategic thing that we need to think about, which is a provider collaborative with the Herefordshire and Worcestershire Health and Care Trust. Welcome to Sue Harris, who I think I saw on the gallery a few minutes ago, so I think she's still here. But I'm handing over, I think, to Joe first. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So just in the context of putting patients first that we've been talking about this morning, we know, don't we, that often it's between organisations where services sometimes fall down. It's important that we work with our partners in the system to make sure we deliver the best services we can. We met as a board with Health and Care Trust last year. We agreed that actually we wanted to seek further collaboration in terms of the way that we work together. This is very consistent with the NHSE policy around building and developing provider collaboratives. So the Memorandum of Understanding you see before you is a first step back into that space to be able to identify those areas we want to work collectively together to improve the experience for our patients in Worcestershire. It's very much based on a MOU that actually went to the Worcester Executive Committee, which is our place committee, back in the spring. And I've invited Sue along today just to provide some feedback from her trust board that met yesterday and where I was yesterday, to both provide that mutual support for agreement to this paper, which they did approve at the board yesterday. The addendum identifies some areas we've already been working together on, but also some other potential areas we could look at. But if we're in agreement today, the next step would be to form a small steering group just to really identify the work plan so we can actually ensure that we take this work forward. And if I may, Chair, I'll just hand to Sue to add any other comments before opening it up to the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, and I do appreciate you having me here today. So we did discuss this yesterday. Joe did come along, we did this item jointly. A huge amounts of support for progressing this with pace. I think the board are very keen to get the steering group established and move into practical next steps. I think we appreciate that MOUs are words, unless we can move them into delivery, we won't really pull the benefits through to our patients. So I'm not much more to add. It's been a bit of a slow burn, so Joe and I have already started to talk about how we pull the steering group together to get some pace and move this through to delivery. So nothing more to add. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sue, and I appreciate again. Apologies at the fact that we are we are doing things a little bit at pace ourselves today to free up as much time for the executive and Alicia team. A couple of hands up. Simon.
Thanks very much. Very much welcome this. Draw colleagues' attention if they haven't seen us already to page 51 and 52. 51 in particular, what we're already doing. I think sometimes we don't appreciate fully how we are already working with colleagues. In this case, the Health and Care Trust, page 52, on what we're looking to do. Particularly, I hope, on the frailty pathway, where we're looking to develop a new way for the Onward Care team. I'm hoping that the County Council will be involved in that as well. Certainly the leader of the County Council, when he came and saw the first floor of the UEC before it was opened, actually specifically mentioned potentially having social workers from the county based with our staff and with the Onward Care team in that physical space, looking at people and actually deciding there in real time rather than phone calls or emails, in real time as a single team, this is where these people need to go to. So I think, let's crack on with that and make sure it actually works in practice. I think there are other things we need to be looking at as well, and only quite recently a senior member of local government raised with me the lack of a walk-in centre in Worcester, which for some of us with memories will recall Farrier House. And I wonder if that's something we ought to be revisiting as well, because one of the key pressures we face is too many people coming to our A&E who don't need to be there but have nowhere else to go, don't think they can get a GP appointment. So maybe this MOU could be used to help us start looking at what might be something that would be just a new facility deflecting people coming away or coming into A&E, and obviously the government's allocated a certain sum of money for buying social care beds. Maybe some of that, if it comes Worcestershire's way, could be directed to some sort of new initiative along those lines as well. But very much welcome this paper. I have one question though, and that's specifically about information sharing. Do we have the right protocols in place to ensure that we're able to share the correct information that will allow this to happen? It's not a legally binding document, and I just want to make sure that we are as ready as we should be to make sure proper information is being shared so that we can maximise the opportunities from the MOU.
Right, thank you. Simon, we've got everyone, we've got a lot of hands up, so what I suggest is let's go through all the questions, and then and maybe, I don't know who wants to come at the end. Would that be Matthew, or do you want to go at the end, Matthew? Okay, so I'll leave you to the end, and then if Joe and Sue want to have any closing remarks, that's probably the way to go. So let me go next to Colin. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to endorse and support Simon's comments, I think it's absolutely right. In principle, we do this. Those early priorities are absolutely the right things to look at. But as ever, as the sort of analytic, I think to myself, these are words. How are we going to wrap an accountability framework around it? So I'd be really interested in developing some metrics around outcomes that are very specific, so we can see the tangible benefits of this.
Absolutely, that's totally agree with that. Christine.
Yeah, this is great, isn't it? And particularly welcoming paragraph 12.3, which gives a really good steer to the purpose and activities of the Clinical Practitioner Forum in terms of its role in quality improvement. So I was really pleased to see that in here, so thank you.
Brilliant, thank you, Christine. Rebecca.
Yeah, thank you. This fits really neatly within the framework that we developed. The place arrangements, the MOUs, very much talk to each other and are consistent, which is really helpful. In terms of the specific question about information sharing, we've got the ability to share the information that we need to between the organisations, and we can manage that through the various RG streams that we've got, and happy to support as the data protection officer if there's any issues or blocks there. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Rebecca. And just one comment that I will add to this, because I think it's part of it. One of the things that Mark Yates, Chair of the Herefordshire and Worcestershire Health and Care Trust, and I have been working on with Rebecca and Jill's help at Health and Care Trust is the idea that we would like to suggest that the chairs of each of our board committees might wish or have an open invitation to attend the equivalent committee at a time, just so that, you know, if there's something on the agenda that would be beneficial, be helpful to have the insight and perspective of the other side, and so on. Now, Rebecca and Jill are in the process of putting some sort of guidelines around that process, but it is our intention to make that, to try and make that real and live, starting I think from next month. I think we said, didn't we, February? So that for those of you that are chairs of committees will be notified about this, and it's just a case of, you know, it's not something you have to do, but if it was helpful for Colin as chair of audit and assurance to attend their audit committee, or for Julie in quality to attend theirs, and so on, and vice versa, of course, it's a mutual two-way interaction. That's something that we are hopefully going to have in place by next month, but when we've got all of that nailed down, I'll hopefully be able to share that formally. Matthew.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks to Joe and Sue for progressing this. Has been a little bit longer gestation, I think, than we'd all have liked, but it's good to get to this point, and completely endorse all the points that have been made. I think we, pages 51 and 52, I think we probably need to do a little bit more publicity around the joint work that we do to make sure that there's better awareness, probably in both organisations and across the county, in terms of the joint endeavours that we've had in place, many of which have been there for quite some time. I think and I obviously fully sign up to the importance of getting some really good traction on some things that are going to make a difference to the patients and the public in the county. I do, though, think it's really important that from a board perspective we approach this to seek situations where we can see a win-win from a patient perspective, so that where we might make decisions to shift the leadership of a service, or shift the location of a service, or whatever that might be, that we take the approach to look at the benefits realised from a patient perspective, rather than perhaps get into a situation where there's any sense of winners and losers from an organisational perspective, because I think that mindset would hold us back in being able to progress things that would make a difference, add value for patients, and also add value for the taxpayer. And for me, in terms of endorsing this, I think it's really important that our mindset as a board is seeking, as I said, a win-win from a patient and a taxpayer perspective. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, totally echo those comments. I think that's very right. Just before we close this item, Joe, Sue, did either of you want to come in on anything that's been said or comment? Thanks.
First of all, can I just thank people's interest and actually welcoming, because I think this is really important that we do see this as a first step. I think coming out of the leadership strategy event we had in November, it's really clear the areas that we need to work for together on behalf of patients. So Matthew, I think your summing up was absolutely spot on. We need to take a different approach as to how we get into this, and that will require a little bit of a change of culture, I think, in terms of the way we as a board, but also, I won't speak for Sue and the board, but also just speaking to her and Mark and others, in terms of actually how we work better together, because we are just here for our patients to improve their experience.
Yep, well said. And Sue, did you have anything to finish?
No, I mean, just how great it is to have been to both board meetings in 24 hours and had this kind of response. It provides such an opportunity to make a step change for our patients. So thank you all, as Joe said, for your interest. And I suppose just to note Colin's point around the metrics and outcomes, so this becomes a tangible way forward. I think that's something that Joe and I will feed into that initial steering group conversation, so we start to get those into the conversation early.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Anyway, thank you, Sue, for taking the time to join us today. Much appreciated. As you can see, there's a lot of enthusiasm for this side of the fence. We recognise that we're all going to need to think a little bit differently and not think about organisational boundaries quite so much. But yeah, patient front and centre. This could be the start of something really important. So thank you, Sue, and thank you, Joe, and the team for bringing this to us. Right, moving on then to the integrated performance report, which you will hopefully have had a chance to look at, if not digest every single page. In the interest of time, what I would like to propose is the following, and given our focus and the operational pressures, I would like us to break this down into sections where we maybe get the escalations and exception statements on an area, we have a chance to ask a question or two, we move on to the next section and keep this as crisp as we can, focusing on what we need to know. And can we particularly, and this is an appeal to anyone that's speaking to any of these areas, what I think we are particularly interested in, I'm sure as a board, is we recognise that, as others have said, that the circumstances at the moment are just horrendous. But we have a responsibility to try as much as we can to manage the risks that we are facing in this circumstance. And I think what might be helpful for board members is, when you are talking about an area or giving us the highlights, if you could just share with us at a high level the kinds of things we are doing, that we can get some assurance that we are of the sorts of actions we're taking in terms of that risk management. So if everyone is happy with that approach, what I would like to ask is if we could talk about the following areas. I'm happy to add any others if people are desperate, but what I would like us to talk about would be elective performance, cancer, UEC, quality and safety, people and culture, and that's particularly about the health and well-being aspects of it, and then of course finance. And I'd like to take it in those sections, and what I will do is ask the chairs of the board committees of each area, after we've heard about that section, to perhaps comment at that point again, to try and just make things a little bit slicker. So if we start with the subject of elective, who would like to talk us through the sort of the highlights on the elective area? I know Vicky would normally present the opening page, but I don't know, Vicky, whether you would prefer to hand over to Paul, or entirely up to you how we do this. Thank you.
Chair, I think it's entirely appropriate, because I was probably going to just do an overview in terms of the assurance level, which was 4 months 8, and remembering this is actually data around the November period, whereas actually I think what you probably want to hear is where are we now. So I'll probably hand back to each of those executive directors, with Paul to go first.
Thank you, Vicky. And it wasn't that we didn't want to hear from you, it was just just trying to make us as focused as we can be.
Absolutely, that's no problem.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. I thank my colleague Vicky for that. So I think she's right there. I think this is November, we're now in January, so I think the board needs to know the up-to-date performance. So in relation to the elective side, then we will be reporting no 104 week breaches for December. In terms of the 78 week position, our cohort position, which is how many will breach at the end of the year, as is kind of shown in the report on page 1 of the integrated performance report, we had a starting point of 23,901. That now stands at 3,985. Our target position for it was 3,856, so we're about 100 out against where we wanted to be, but I think you'll see that the teams have made significant progress in getting us down from that 23,900 level. And then in terms of, so that's the position on elective, they're the headline numbers, and that's what colleagues are kind of focused on. And we expect, I can confirm, we expect for January, February and March to again report no 104 week breaches, and we're monitoring all of those patients on a day-by-day basis. In terms of cancer, cancer remains a challenge, and I know we've said this on quite a few occasions, but we are making inroads. Our 62-day plus position, if you recall, when this was raised as a concern in October, we had 826 patients waiting over 62 days. As of the end of last week, that was down to 546. Our trajectory was 695, so we are well below our trajectory, and our end of year target is 328, so we're well on the way on that. That's been a combination of some excellent work done by the team in skin, who've reduced their numbers significantly. We've also now started to see the impact of the changes that the urology team have been making, together with the increased LAPT activity that we put in place just before Christmas and runs for another 2 weeks. And so we have actually, the urology position has been increasing month on month, and it's now stabilised, and last week dropped. And then colorectal, where there's been again changes in the pathway. So we have seen improvements in the 3 big areas of lower GI, skin and urology. Having said that, though, of the 546 patients that still are waiting over 62 days, 116 of those are skin. Our position on that is that we are aiming to get that to 0 by the 2nd week in February, and our trajectory to 0 at 116 last week is online. Urology is the biggest number there, and that stands at 249, and we do have a challenge there because we have significantly increased capacity for triage, initial consultation and biopsy and MRI, but whilst we're significantly reducing the delays that previously exist at that front end of the pathway, at diagnosis, if the outcome is surgery, our problem is that our capacity for prostatectomy remains very limited at 2 patients per week, as colleagues are still developing their robotic practice. We are in discussions with a private hospital that the region put us in contact with, called the Park in Nottingham, I think, about whether they will take some of our patients. And There was an initial suggestion that they had significant capacity. As often it transpires not to be quite accurate, but they have indicated they may be able to take 3 robotic procedures a week for us to the end of March, in February and March. So not a lot, but it will help. So the challenge is actually where surgery is the defined treatment once a diagnosis is confirmed. So that's the position on the elective side. And I should add, just to make sure that it is clear for the board, our trajectory on the 62-day was 3 to 8. We do need to remember, if you go back to March last year, the region or national, I don't actually know whether it's national or region, but they set us a trajectory of 160, which at the time we said is just not going to happen. It is impossible because of the position we were in. So although I think we're online to hit our trajectory of 3 to 8, I do need to make it clear to the board that our external colleagues will see the trajectory as unacceptable and they would want to see it at 160.
Okay, thank
so
you.
That's the elective. Do you want any questions?
Right, yes, I was just going to pause you there because we've done elective and cancer, so let's stop there. Any questions or comments on what Paul has shared with us? I don't see any hands. Paul, just a question from me. I mean, obviously, with the threat of ongoing industrial action, that presumably has the potential of impacting the trajectories that you are describing. So far, I know we've only had December and January at the moment, but so far, have you got a sense of what impact it's having now, and do you have a sense of what the potential impact might be going forward?
So the impact so far, so in December we were impacted by the RCN industrial action, where we had to cancel a number of outpatient clinics, diagnostic procedures and non-urgent elective procedures. That we did agree with the RCN, as I think Matthew said at the beginning of the meeting, that Matthew and Tina and everyone has worked hard to have a positive relationship with the RCN, and we did agree that with them that we would continue with cancer procedures, but we did lose some elective outpatients, new outpatients, follow-up outpatients and routine procedures on the second day of the RCN strike. In terms of the ambulance industrial action, that whilst it's been hugely challenging for our all colleagues on the emergency pathway and trying to manage the elective work, we have not lost any elective surgery as a consequence of that action. Having said that, if I could perhaps come back to it on the update on urgent care, because it's not I can't directly relate it to the industrial action, but the challenges on urgent care are having an impact.
Okay, thank you, Paul. I don't see any hands. So, Paul, can I ask you to go into urgent emergency care then? Thank you.
Yeah. So, in terms of the emergency care, I think there's just a couple of things in numbers I'd just like to point out, as everyone seems to like different numbers. I think what we need to recognise is that I think colleagues would internally and externally would normally use 2019-20 as the base year when making any comparisons, because 2021 and 21-22 were severely affected by COVID. So if you look where we are this year and where we think we will land compared to 19-20, then attendances at our two emergency departments, so I'm only looking at our emergency departments, not the type 3 minor injury units, will be up by about 10% this year compared to 1920. And that's interesting because ambulance conveyances will actually be down by about 16%. And I think what that does tell you is that attendances are up, conveyances are down, and I think part of the reason conveyancing is down is, I think there's some good work across the system with 2-hour response, etc. But equally, what the clinical teams are finding in the emergency department is the acuity of walking patients in the waiting room. So I think part of that balance in those two numbers is patients are making their decision to come in themselves, perhaps because of media stories about ambulance delays. And that perhaps also explains why sometimes externally colleagues get a little frustrated with us when we pull patients into the main department from the waiting area rather than the ambulance, and that's because those patients in the waiting area are of a higher acuity than those on the back of an ambulance. So I just wanted to give some context to that. And I think the other thing that it demonstrates the work that's been done, and I think Christine referred to it earlier, around the new surgical and medical assessment units and the gynae assessment unit, is that our conversion rate, which is the number of patients that are admitted from in ED compared to the number of patients who attend, looks to be this year to head towards an outcome of about 24%. So of all ED attendances, around about 24%, just under a quarter are being admitted. If you compare that to the base year, that figure was 29%. So it shows that although the acuity of presentation is probably higher than 1920, we're admitting less because either the ED team are actually able to turn around and discharge, or those patients are being handled in the same day emergency care units and then being discharged rather than admitting. So there's just the kind of context in terms of where we are today. Matthew gave a really fantastic description of what it's been like over the last probably 4 to 6 weeks in his chief exec report. But just to give you some context, we have basically been full in terms of beds every day. We only report our occupied beds against the baseline, and I think all colleagues will know that because of the level of boarding we've been doing at Worcester, although we've been reporting a 99% bed occupancy, it's actually really about 110 to 112% when you count the boarders. We have been boarding on all of the wards. We have updated site on most of the general and acute wards. We haven't been up boarding, for example, on the oncology ward or something like that, and obviously nowhere near paediatrics or maternity. This week, yesterday afternoon, with support from our cardiology colleagues, you'll know that we've got the 10-bed cardiac CCU, cardiac care unit on Aikenbury 2. They are big bays, and we actually increased that to doubling up in 6 of the bays. So we actually had 16 on the 10-bed CCU. On the wards, Christine, Jackie and myself have done a review along with help, actually a lot of help from Sue Smith and Alison Robinson, Jackie's deputies, and redone the boarding. So on some wards we are boarding 3 patients, on some wards where we were boarding 1 we're now boarding 2, and on a couple of wards where we weren't boarding we're now boarding 1. And as I came in this morning, we had 24 patients boarded on the wards. We actually had got down to 5 patients in CCU, and we had 5 patients overnight on NEC. And at the same time, we had 29 DTAs in our ED at Worcester. So if you add that lot up, we basically had 63 patients who were in a bed or needed a bed, and were not in a proper bed because they were boarding on ward corridors, doubling up in CCU, or staying overnight in ED or NEC. So that's the sort of context that we're facing, and the Alex has had equal challenges. It's, you know, we mustn't focus on Worcester. We must be clear. The Alex have done, the team there have done some fantastic work over the last 3 to 4 days in trying to mitigate the challenges there. But it's been a similar position at the Alex. The discharge lounge, which you know is on what was Ward 1, that we had to reverse that and turn it into a ward, and we've had 18 patients as inpatients on there. And going back to your earlier point, Chair, around elective, I was determined never to let it happen, and I'm afraid I failed, and we had to convert Ward 14, the elective and emergency urology ward, into a 19-bed acute medical ward because of the pressures there were so bad. So that's where there's been an impact. Now, whether it's indirectly strike related, I don't actually, I think it's just the sheer pressure and numbers in the front door and the acuity of the patients. But we have dropped, you know, we've had our 75 ring-fenced acute beds, and Ward 14, which is 9 of them, were dropped. And we also had to flip a 6-bed bay from Ward 16, which is the elective orthopaedic ward, into Ward 12. So we preserved the position of Ward 16 because we can't have medical patients in there, but we flipped the bay over. So we actually lost 25, or a third, of our ring-fenced elective beds over the last probably 3 weeks. So that's the position, and that's the scale of the challenge and pressure that our staff are facing in managing this this level of, well, it's more acuity, I think, rather than excess demand. It's the acuity of patients presenting. But I do think, and I think, sorry, I was just on a call, but I think I heard Christine mention earlier in the meeting, it was really welcome to have Will Taylor, the CMO from the ICS down with Dan Hastings, who's brilliant, as you all know, and Christine going round, and you know, Christine can say it, she didn't say it, sorry, because I was on a call, but clearly Will's view was there are not patients here all over the place that don't need to be in your hospital. So that's why I finished on the urgent care, Anita.
Yeah, thank you, Paul, and completely, you know, certainly I had the pleasure of shadowing Tina as the on-call exec last Sunday, and I was aware of those decisions being made at the time to flip beds at the Alex, elective beds, and the pressures generally. So yeah, certainly everything I've seen myself with my own eyes over the last couple of weeks would concur. The other thing I would say about the acuity of walk-ins, I think Christine told me earlier this week of an incident of a lady with a fractured neck of femur, i.e. a broken pelvis, who was brought in by relatives in the back seat of a car and then had to be carried out of the car into the hospital. Yeah, can't imagine what pain that lady was in, but gives you some idea about the acuity of the people that are presenting, not on ambulances. Right, lots of hands up, so let's get through these, because I say I've got some other areas we need to talk about. So Simon first.
Thanks, Paul, for that update. And can I just say, from personal experience, having an elderly relative who spent over 24 hours on a trolley in the corridor in A&E, that he was very well looked after. He was very grateful for the care he got, and I could see it for myself when I went to visit him a couple of times. And he's now been admitted to another ward within the hospital. Paul, I know the comment about conveyances and acuity of patients, but do we also monitor how many of those patients who present on their own, the walk-ins, who should not be there? Because I take the points that you were making, but do we actually look at, and I know we have colleagues going on to the back of ambulances, and ambulances in some instances being sent away because the patient doesn't need to come to us. But are we monitoring how many people walk in who shouldn't be there and should be somewhere else?
Yeah, I mean, it is difficult to do that monitoring, but Ben Hoskin, who works closely with the urgent care division, it's a proxy really than an absolute, because it's looking at it's a condition-based analysis, and also there are consultants and our senior AMPs have been at the front door triaging up front to assess whether patients could be turned around and returned to primary care. So yes, if the board would think it would be helpful, I can provide some data at the next meeting on that, but I would say it's a proxy, it's not a definitive, it's condition based. And I think, as Matthew said as well, the other factor that we have to face is the extent to which primary care is under pressure. But I think one of the things where we have questioned it, but it's now been resolved in one sense with the opening of the new surgical assessment, was patients presenting in ED with a GP letter saying go to the ED, with this, and the new surgical assessment service, the team are fantastic with the work they're doing, and they're pulling those patients out of ED, and certainly both Dave Raven and Claire Bush have commented on how well that new surgical assessment unit is supporting the emergency department.
Thanks, Paul. If I could just come back very quickly, Anita, I think if we had that data, it would help us engage in a conversation at system level on how we help those patients who do present, who don't need to be there, go somewhere else. Because without that data, it's a bit difficult just to say anecdotally, well, there's a lot of them shouldn't have been there, because stopping as many people coming through the front door as possible who don't need to be there ought to be a real priority for us.
I mean, I suppose one thing we could provide, Simon, if to the board that might be helpful is, of course, we do have the primary care unit operating adjacent to the ED, and we could show the numbers that are going into that primary care unit every day, because they're presenting in ED, but they're actually being seen and managed by the GP in the primary care unit. So that would give another proxy as to, well, that wouldn't be a proxy, that would be an actual. So I can provide that.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful, because I think if part of the solution is finding alternatives, it would be useful to know just what we think the demand might be for alternatives. So I think that would be helpful. Thank you. Julie.
Thanks, Paul. Paul, can you just explain why we're not presenting the bed occupancy as 120 and whatever percent it is, and it's still saying at 99? Because I think that needs to be out there. But we've got an additional ward full of patients not in a ward.
The reason, don't shoot me, Julie, the reason is technical. If you're saying you're planning to increase the number of patients you can hold on a ward, then that means you need to increase your denominator. I know, ridiculous.
I just think it needs making an alert somewhere that actually a hospital designed for X amount of patients is running an additional ward of patients not in a ward.
Yeah.
Because that is not, again, it's not the care any of us want to provide, and it's providing additional workload and stress for the staff who are already working their socks off.
Yeah.
Just a point.
Absolutely. Okay, thanks, Julie. Christine.
Yeah, just a couple of things really. There is a piece of work going on at system level about alternatives to ED, which I'm representing our organisation on, which is looking at urgent and emergency care demand across the system, and what can and should be provided elsewhere so that patients don't always have to come to our emergency department. So I think that will be a helpful piece of work to us. The second thing is that I'm conscious that for people who are relatively new to this, what we're talking about in terms of boarding and additional beds and putting patients in corridors and so on may be a bit of a mystery. What we're operating is a thing called a continuous flow model, the North Bristol model, which is about actively pushing patients out of the emergency department regardless of whether there is actually a bed to put them in. There's been a really good write-up of that in the BMJ by Luella Vaughan, who's done a lot of work on hospital flow models. And so I can send the reference to that article. It's open access online, and I can send it to Rebecca so that she can circulate it so that people have a bit of background.
Thank you, that would be helpful, Christine. Thank you. Jackie.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to put a little bit of perspective with regards to give some assurance, and again, it's building on from what Christine says. If people don't understand what boarding and corridor care is, and I know you walked around with me, of which to be able to see that in real terms from the patient's perspective. None of us and none of our staff, like the boarding. We've got a rigorous process around that. We've worked with our ICB colleagues with regards to a risk assessment for each and every patient, and we are putting our lowest acuity patients through lots of assessments by our medical and nursing teams into those beds that is not in a sort of bedded area. But it is having an impact on privacy and dignity. We do everything we can to try and maintain that as best we can, but it is not the same as being in a ward area. And I do want to really stress that, because you will hear from our staff, they go home feeling that they've not done a good job, and part of that is because of they are nursing patients and providing medical care for patients in an area that isn't provided in that degree. The risk assessment, as I said, and I do want to, CQC have seen our risk assessments as part of when they came in, and do feel that actually the level of care that we are giving under these circumstances is as best we can do. But I do want to emphasise, our aim here must be that we get rid of boarding. And that's what we are absolutely needing to strive to with our system partners, and that's a constant message. It should not become customer practice.
Absolutely, Jackie. Thank you. Right, we have got a lot of hands, but we have got a lot of other things to get through. So can I ask everyone to be a little bit succinct, if possible? Matthew, did you want to come in now, or would you rather come in at the end?
Happy to come in at the end. I had a point about just responding to Simon, but I can cover that at the end. Thanks.
Okay, that would be lovely. Thank you. Sue. Sue, we can't hear you.
Button doesn't always work. I will try to be brief. It might be too early yet, but do we have any data on length of stay? Boarding dilutes not just our nurses' time, but therapies and everything else, and loss of condition and so forth. Now, I know Jackie's colleagues are shifting heaven and earth to do the same for them in the corridor as them in the rest of the ward, and picking lower acuity. But one's instinct would suggest that this is going to increase overall length of stay, but if that is the case, then our system partners would probably want to share that.
Yes, it is. The team have been monitoring this closely, and if you look at last week, the weekend in the 8th of January, and compare that to a rolling 6-week average, as you know, we're boarding at Worcester, and the length of stay is up by 1.4 days. The same weekend in the 8th of January against the rolling 6-week average at the Alex, the length of stay is no different.
That's really interesting, isn't it, Paul? I mean, it's data confirming bias, really.
Yeah.
But that's a lot of bed days, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's an unintended backwards consequence, which I think we talked about when the Bristol model was first proposed, didn't we? But we had no choice.
Yeah.
But that's really, sadly, very helpful to know. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sue, for asking that question. Helpful. Karen.
Thank you. Very quickly, just assurance, I guess, that as part of the boarding and the other arrangements that are having to be put in place, are we monitoring separately if there are any incidents, any serious incidents related to that? Okay, that's fine. Don't need any more detail. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. Matthew, do you want to wrap this section up?
Thanks. Obviously, a difficult situation as I referred to earlier in the meeting. I think the couple of things just to add. Certainly on the length of stay question, we have seen length of stay go up, both in terms of the shorter length of stay patients and those with longer length of stay, and that's an area that we need to understand. Part of the peer review yesterday was to see if there was anything obvious that was getting in the way of patients being discharged in a timely fashion. I think dependency is clearly one of the key drivers for length of stay, but I think we need to do a little bit more work to understand whether there's anything else that's causing some of those delays. If they are indeed delays, or that we just have patients that are taking a little bit longer to get better. I think the second thing, Simon, you referenced around do we understand why people come? Of course, Healthwatch locally did a report where they interviewed people that were in the waiting room and tried to understand what were the drivers for people coming to ED. They've just circulated for us a report where they've interviewed a number of patients that have attended minor injuries units to understand what were the drivers and what the level of awareness around minor injuries units within the county is, and we'll be considering that report having only landed yesterday in all the day before into inboxes. But I think there'll be some learning there in relation to the awareness of minor injuries units for people in Redditch and Worcester, because of course neither of those towns, cities have minor injuries units. They are dispersed in other parts of the county, because I think the logic was that there were emergency departments in those two areas. So there's a bit of further learning to be done there, which we'll bring back through the Finance Performance Committee in due course. And I think then the other point to note is, of course, we did have some quite useful data a couple of months ago in the Integrated Performance Report that showed those patients that are coming in by ambulance, those that are going home, those that are walking in, those that are going home not receiving any treatment. And that also is data set, Simon, I think gives us some indication as to those kind of patients that are coming to an emergency department that really don't need to, and then how do we work with our partners across the system and Healthwatch and other groups to help people to navigate their way appropriately, because I think one of the findings from the recent Healthwatch report is that people don't know where they should go for what, and I think that's a feature of other parts of the country as well, where people are not quite sure where they should be receiving and going for care. And just finally, Chair, if I may just again to note the points that Paul's made. This is a very difficult situation, but we're not a particular outlier. Pretty much everybody across the Midlands has had a very difficult time across the last 4 weeks. Having said that, we've still got to do everything that's within our gift to improve patient safety and staff welfare, and that's the absolute focus of the executive team and the senior leadership in the Trust. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. Right, I just want to, as I say, I think before we leave this section of the sort of the big ones, I want to also acknowledge, actually there is significant progress as Paul highlighted in things like elective and cancer, that I know, because UEC seems to be consuming all our attention for understandable reasons and the consequences of it, but we mustn't fail to acknowledge that the really good work that is being done in other areas that are just as important. So to say that, right, I will call on Julie in just a moment, but I am very conscious of the time. We have got a fair few things to do. Are we all right if we, because I know we've also got some reports that need to be presented for noting as well and assurance, but I do think this is important that we talk about these things. So I will, with your indulgence, I may need to run over beyond 12 o'clock. If we'll have a hard stop at 10 past 12, whatever happens, but fills in a little bit of leeway just in case. So, but on the basis we're doing this in a whistle-stop basis, patient quality and safety, I wonder if I could ask Jackie to just pick up or highlight exception, escalation. And I wonder, given Karen's question about patient harm and monitoring of it, you might just want to say a little bit about how we're actually doing that in that context. Thank you, Jackie.
Yes. Thank you very much, Chair. So, as people will see, and I'll take the metrics as being viewed, all of our quality priorities are very important for this year, but the IPC one is the particular one I wish to draw your attention to. Particularly, we know that our C. difficile has been an area where we have reached the target. We've been working very closely with our IPC colleagues across the system, as well as in the national team, with regards to the actions, which are ongoing actions that I believe you discussed also at last month's board meeting. That absolutely continues, but we have not seen a deterioration. Obviously, managing outbreaks, we've had flu, which has peaked, and we have seen an impact of that in our ward areas. We are seeing that petering out at the moment, and we have not got the number of outbreaks that we were seeing in December as a sort of live picture of that. There is a big focus, I think, with our IPC colleagues with regards to antimicrobial stewardship and prescribing, which is the main action that is being taken forward, I think, within that IPC arena. I'll do also just two other areas I just wish to raise from a quality nursing point of view before I give a little bit of description with regards to the harm process, is to do with our complaints. You will see that our complaints, we've not met the target for the last 2 years with regards to responding to complaints within a 25-day period. That's partly because of the impact that we are seeing with our teams who are very focused on other quality metrics, but we have also seen an increase in our complaint numbers that we've had coming through. Predominantly, the theme for this is to do with the waits that people are experiencing. So there's no other sort of safety concern that we are seeing within our complaint and our PALS response, but it is taking quite a lot of actions that are needed to try and support it. Surgery is the biggest area of the theme that's come through with regards to the complaint responses, and that's obviously, as you'll see, that links in and triangulates with what Paul was saying with regards to that sort of recovery, elective recovery element. But triangulated again, which is the important bit with the quality metrics, our friends and family recommended rate for our inpatient areas is positive. And I think, again, that's tantamount to the amount of support that we are providing. But again, one of the areas that we know we need to improve as we go forward with our quality and safety strategy is the issue of how can we support our staff when they are so busy with regards to the communication elements, keeping our patients updated when actually they are so busy with other bits is an area we want to focus on. With regards to providing assurance of our governance framework with regards to reporting and incident reporting from harm, we have a very positive culture, and that's shown through the data of incident reporting. Obviously, when people are busy, there is a focus that we need to do to make sure that they have got the time to report some of those sort of incidents. The serious incidents with regards to harm is reported through, and Christine may wish to provide a little bit more when we come onto that area of the quality metrics. But the SI group that runs every week is very, very closely monitoring, right from the moment of reporting through to the deep dive into the big investigation. And we have not seen an increase with regards to that at this moment in time. But there is a lot of scrutiny from ward to board with regards to incidents and the reporting of harm. Happy to explore further, but that's just to give a high level list for you.
Thank you, Jackie. Right, I don't see any hands raised. So, Julie, Chair of QGC. Oh, sorry. Colin, as usual, has a reputation, for those that don't know, of coming in at the last minute. So, Colin.
It was just really picking up your last point, Jackie. I absolutely assured that serious incidents are really rigorously looked at. But I was wondering what the process for escalation to the board itself is with regard to a NEVA event.
So all NEVA events obviously will be come through reported and will be there in our sort of quality metrics that we are presenting through. I think you will see often, certainly through to our quality governance meeting, that those areas are often discussed in the investigation report is then presented through to see what themes and learning that we have from it. Thankfully, and we hope, NEVA event should be a NEVA event, but Christine, I don't know if there's anything else you wish to add with regards to the nature of those. We have, we've reported 3, haven't we, through in that sort of last year.
Quality Governance Committee gets an initial verbal report at the first meeting after the NEVA event has happened, so as soon as we can, and then the learning from the NEVA event is shared through the serious incident report.
Great, thank you, Christine. Thank you, Jackie. Julie, conscious of time, but did you have any comments to make as chair of QGC?
No, Jackie's been very comprehensive, but that's part of we always discuss as well what needs escalated in the Quality Committee and make sure that they get escalated up there. Jackie's been very comprehensive in what she's covered there, and the notes are very thorough.
Great, thank you. So you're happy for us to take your report as read in the... Thank you very much. Right, so moving swiftly on. People and culture, and I'm particularly interested in the staff wellbeing angle, if that's all right. Could I ask Tina to comment, and then I'll come to Sue to give Eddie her thoughts and just check if she's comfortable with the P&C report. So Tina, again, highlights, escalation, exception really, but just if you could give us some assurance on that area, please.
I'll just focus on health and wellbeing. I'm happy to take questions on the other topic, but so as at month 8 we still continue to benchmark well regards to our sickness absence rates compared to our peer group. We have seen an increase in short-term sickness absence and a slight reduction in long-term sickness, which is positive. We have hotspot areas with regards to staff groups, which are the estates, midwifery, and the healthcare scientists and allied health professions. So we'll continue to refresh their occupational health risk assessments, the individual ones, and put some more focus through the HR advisory team to support line managers with the health and wellbeing conversations. Just a bit more of a live update. So we have seen an increase in sickness absence in the last 2 weeks of December, circa 80 to 100 more headcount off each day, and that sort of aligns to the increase in COVID and flu. So before, our top 3 reasons for sickness absence were the S10, which is the mental health related, followed by COVID and then musculoskeletal, but we've now, the second highest now is the flu stroke cold reasons. So as at yesterday, I've always monitored the mental health, and we had 82 people off yesterday, and that's slightly above our normal run rate, which is about 70 to 75. So we're not seeing a big increase in mental health related, stress related absence at this stage. It's looking to be the short-term absence around flu and colds. So I'll pause there to see if there's any specific questions around that.
I don't see any hands, and even Colin's shaking his head, so I'll take that as a definite then. Thank you, Tina, for that update. Sue, can I ask you to comment if there's anything you want to comment on, or are you happy for us to take your committee reports as read?
Just a couple of small things. Although, obviously Tina's right, but it's probably important that the board can be assured that although we have a slight increase in sickness, we're still better than the national average at the moment, which in the current climate is everyone's to be applauded for. The other thing I'll add is that our staff turnover, although it's generally slightly improved to about 13%, we need to keep an eye on some hotspots, and the light of conversations we've just been having, specialty medicine is an outlier at 15% of turnover, and that's probably something we need to keep. I'm sure Tina and I'll keep our eye on in the P&C group. And we have increased our establishments. and that's great, but it's too early to see the benefit from the hard work that Tina's department have been doing against the forward recruitment improvement package. Thank you. But they were working incredibly hard there.
Yeah, thank you, Sue. And we can take the rest of the report from P&C as well. Thank you very much. Right, moving on then. Again, to finance and Neil, if I could please make the same bed, because I've still now got only got 7 minutes left. We've still got a lot to do. So, Neil, highlights, escalation, exception. We do have a paper coming to private board, which I think we can relate it to a particular aspect, as I know. But I don't know if you just wanted to share some key messages on the finance area.
Thanks, Chair. I'll keep it brief then. A very much similar thing to previous month's reports more recently. So a positive variance in 0.1 million, bringing us to 0.6 adverse to date. However, that is underpinned by non-recurrent benefits. So we've now put in close to 2 million from the balance sheet on a non-recurrent basis, and we've got slippage on development of over £1 million that is underpinning that position. So we are storing up a problem in terms of next year's plan. That's largely driven by the PEP shortfall around the PEP and the additional pressures that we're experiencing. And obviously, during the course of this meeting, we've referenced a number of times now the additional capacity that's being put on across the Trust. And whilst recognising some of that will be funded through the winter pressure allocation from our commissioners, some of it isn't, and that's therefore part of a conversation that I'll need to have. But I am expecting there'll be a change to this position next month, reflecting some of that. Still projecting at this point that we will achieve our 19.9 million plan, but it is increasingly looking likely that there will be further pressure on those mitigations and potential use of the balance sheet. In respect of capital, the capital plan, we've spent 12.9 to date of the 60 million, so that's a significant amount of money still to be spent between now and the end of the year. We have been speaking to Region in respect of brokerage to try and move some of those funds forward into next year. Got an agreement in principle. I'm right to them this week to confirm, hopefully they'll confirm that back in writing, although notoriously challenging in that respect at times. But I would look to get some confirmation as soon as possible. We've got a plan to the end of the year around capital to protect that into next year. Happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. I don't see any hands raised. Now, Richard, as chair, is not with us today. I don't know, is Simon, were you on the last lot of F&Ps? Yes, I don't know if you could, was there anything you wanted to bring to our attention? I apologise, I've just thrown this at you, but I don't know if there's anything planned.
That's fine, I noted that Richard was here. I wouldn't add much more to Neil other than to highlight again the pressures of PEP. I know we're trying to have a different approach to PEP, but we are in seriously challenging situation for this year's PEP.
Yep, and as I say, we'll be continuing that conversation in our private meeting. Right, so if everyone is happy, the overall IPR has a level 4 for assurance. Are we comfortable with that level, please, given what we've heard today? And the team nods, thank you very much. We have looked at, or we have reviewed the committee assurance reports. So in the next 3 minutes, we have got a couple of things that we need to basically just have either noting, or we need to confirm our assurance of. So East Kent, is that you, Jackie, that's going to talk about that one?
Yes, although I take the paper as read, it's there really for people's awareness. So nothing better add than what's
Thank you very much, and obviously on an ongoing basis we'll be taking into account the implications of that for ourselves. Thank you. Right, safer staffing report. First of all, adult nursing. Again, anything you wish to highlight?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So main area for noting through November, the safest staffing levels for the adult and children's and neonatal wards were maintained. That's predominantly thanks to the use of temporary staffing, which obviously is having an impact for us with regards to our spend, but we are keeping those levels and maintaining those levels. There are no harms that have been identified through any deficits in staffing levels on the wards.
Thank you, Jackie. And midwifery, I think Justine is here. I apologise, Justine, that I can't get you to present your report fully, but I wondered if there was anything you just wish to draw to our attention, please.
No, that's absolutely fine. Thanks, Chair. It's just the assurance levels increased to 5 because we've got some positive news in there, and I think if you've read the report, you can see where the improvements have been made. So a good month for us in November. So I won't say any more than that unless anybody's got any specific questions.
And I don't see any hands. So we have a level 6 for adult nursing, a level 5 for midwifery. Are we comfortable accepting those assurance levels? Yep, thank you very much. Okay, brilliant. We have no other matters, any other business. I will therefore bring to a close this public board meeting. Thank you to everyone for your participation and also your willingness to sort of help us move things along. We will be convening now and we'll be resuming. I can't see Rebecca's face at the moment. I think we were scheduled to come back in 20 minutes time for a private meeting. Just before I do that, however, apologies, Joe Ringshall from Health Watch, I normally ask you if you had any comments on what you've heard. Joe, did you want to say anything?
Thank you, Anita. No, I mean, there's not really a lot I can add, is it? I mean, it was quite difficult listening. We've had some quite difficult stories, and you know, we're grateful for the hard work, grateful for the no clinical incidents, and grateful for focus on safety. But as you all know, it's not good being a patient, really, not much fun. But patients are very skeptical, so we get a lot of positive, negative feedback where people go, the staff were lovely and they work so hard and they're so under pressure, but you know, the overall experience is not always good.
No, absolutely, and I think we are all really conscious of that. But thank you for your comments, and as I say, particularly your acknowledgement that we are in extraordinary circumstances, and I know our staff are doing everything they can. But thank you for that. Right, so are we comfortable, board members, with a 20-minute break, or would you like 30? Because we can start at 12:40 if you prefer. Any thoughts from anyone?
It's okay with 20 minutes with me as well.
Does anyone disagree if we do 20 minutes? Can you grab a sandwich in 20 minutes?
Yeah, that's good.
Is that fine? Okay, thank you. In which case, thank you very much to everyone. We will bring this one to a close, and for board members, we will resume again at 12:30. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.